But to Australia, I mean, the same kind of breakdown is happening right here. It's not as bad as in Britain, of course not. But the same processes are at work. You know, the mass immigration, multicultural policies, governments going soft on Islamist extremism, not always telling the truth. Other forms of extremism too. Now people getting poorer in what really is a recession here. And then you've got these ugly so-called peace rallies since Hamas slaughtered 1,200 Jews and started a war with Israel. Foul rallies, thuggish.
The conflict has fuelled grievances, promoted protest, exacerbated division, undermined social cohesion and elevated intolerance.
Joining me is the country's top foreign affairs writer, Greg Sheridan of the Australian newspaper. Greg, great to see you back again in the country. What is happening to Australia?
Well, I thought the government announcement today was a little bit weird. I mean, surely the Australian government is the last sentient creature in Western civilization to work out that the terrorism threat has increased since October 7. I think we've been infinitely more successful immigrant country than Britain has, but we have allowed in a very large cohort of Muslim immigrants, of whom a small minority are certainly extremists. Now, in the announcement today, Mike Burgess, for whom I have the greatest respect, said the Gaza conflict was a driver of extremism, but not a cause of extremism. And the whole announcement seemed to have these convoluted words associated with it, where neither the Prime Minister nor the Director General of ASIO would say Islamist extremism. It seems like the Muslim community leaders have bluffed the government and its agencies out of any use of any word in relation to Islamism. But there's still the greatest incidence of terrorism is carried out by Islamist extremists. There is also a growing threat of right-wing terrorism. That should be called out too. But I thought there were a lot of things weird about the government's announcement today. How can you possibly make Tony Burke the Minister for Home Affairs when he represents an electorate with more extremists in it than any other electorate, and when he was so disgraceful in his response to the Hamas massacre in Gaza, and when he wouldn't call out the extremists in his own electorate for the longest time. And then, amazingly, he wasn't there at the announcement today. I mean, what is the Home Affairs Minister doing if he's not concerned with a rise in the threat of terrorism? And the explanation of it all is that the Albanese government approaches all of this through the lens of grubby party politics.
But I think you put your finger on something that's a factor in Britain too, the lack of trust in the authorities to tell you the truth whenever there's some sort of ethnic crime or terrorism event. People don't feel they're getting the full story. Now, I believe, the way they're carrying on, and I've believed this for months, that ASIO must have told the government, don't keep saying Islamist terrorism, play it down, always mention Islamist terrorism or other extremists or, Jews, and try to equal so you don't build up the tension. I don't think they're being honest. And when it comes to the crunch, they're not being trustworthy.
Well, that's a fair inference, Andrew, but I'm not sure ASIO is the villain here. Let me quickly say I have no inside information, but I think it's more likely to have been the other way round. The Albanese government saying to ASIO, for God's sake, give us a formulation of words which doesn't involve us trespassing in any way on the sensitivities of Muslim community leaders in southwest Sydney or other electorates where they're important, like Broadmeadows in Melbourne. I mean, the failure here, I think, is with the Albanese government and its ministers, not with our institutions. And governments misuse institutions to give themselves fraudulent credit. But, Tony Burke in particular, I had to bludgeon him into condemning Muslim leaders in his own electorate who glorified the Hamas murders. And then, of course, he was asked, was Israel committing genocide in Gaza? And he said, oh, well, I don't want to get hung up on a particular word. You can't even deny that Israel's committing genocide. And then they make him the minister. Now, I'm sure Mike Burgess never says anything he doesn't believe. I don't want to speculate about his motivations, but I am much more critical of the government than I am of the agencies that they typically misuse. Although I trace in a column tomorrow how we've gone from calling it Islamist terror under Malcolm Turnbull to Sunni extremism under Scott Morrison to now politically motivated violence, which apparently has nothing to do with Islam in any context whatsoever in today's announcement.